Hello everyone, this is a video on complex PTSD and why I think the inner critic is so strong in complex PTSD. Complex PTSD is a condition that develops due to prolonged and sustained trauma, which means that it's not usually like one incident. It's not like, for instance, an accident or something. It's more like something that goes on. So it could be like long-term abuse, childhood abuse, other things like narcissistic abuse that go on for a while. And I think what happens is that what happens in complex PTSD is this persistent internal failure. That is how the person views it. This failure to control or be able to change the environment and stop the abuse, which fosters this feeling of deep helplessness, chronic helplessness that stays that becomes like a permanent condition unless and until it's actually dealt with and worked on. So I think what happens is that the internal sort of navigating system, it wants to change the external, and it wants to stop the abuse. It wants to actually have that control and power and not be helpless. And when that fails to happen, what happens is that eventually we learn to internalize that desire to control and change and exert power over the world. So we turn it inwards and it becomes like an internal feature. Our ego actually starts attacking us. So instead of attacking and protecting us, which is a basic survival need, we turn it inwards, and that becomes the inner critic. The inner critic becomes so strong that actually it starts to beat us down rather than our perpetrators, our abusers. And this is a common thing in CPTSD, where people often fantasize about revenge, or they fantasize that their abuser wasn't that bad. So that's what I've heard. And also, like, so they did this experiment on this dog, and what they did was like, so they kept this dog in a cage, and they gave it like electric shocks. Great things that they do to animals. So they gave the dog like electric shocks, and over time what happened was the dog learned helplessness, which means that even when the cage door was open and the dog wanted to sort of get out of it, so the dog had already tried so many times to get out of that cage, to get out of that situation. And eventually when the door was left open and he could get out, but he was still being electrocuted, what happened was that he just sort of gave up and lost that sense of meaning or purpose, which is what happened in CPTSD. Lost that instinct to protect himself and lost that desire to be free, and just like went into this super like depressive state, this low energy, low motivation state, where he just sort of accepted the terms of his confinement. And that is also what happens with circus elephants, that basically when an elephant is like young, they tie it to something, and the elephant tries and tries and tries and repeatedly tries to escape that. So then if the elephant is tied to it and he grows up and he keeps being tied to it, so he sort of forms this mental framework that this is his reality, and this is his position in it, which is that he's helpless and there's nothing he can do because he's tried so many times that there is nothing that can be done beyond this point. So that is very debilitating, and that of course CPTSD has its long-term consequences, and the innate shame associated with being helpless and not being able to protect ourselves, even though we're adults. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys. And I think that's why the inner critic is so prominent in people with complex PTSD, and it just like takes over, and it becomes like this force that instead of sort of dealing with the world and tackling it, and that manifesting and actualizing or just expressing that innate sort of deep anger and resentment and unfairness with the situation, rather than comprehending and dealing with that, or externalizing it, we have internalized it. And that is the inner critic and why it's so big in people with CPTSD. So let me know what you guys think, and I hope you like my channel, and keep on watching, keep on subscribing, and I'll be back with the video again soon.